Thank you. Woo! Good morning. You can really feel the buzz, can't you? I can. It's so good to be back here. I just want to, first of all, thank Reverend James Mellon for allowing me to come and use this as a platform to speak. I know I'm usually here singing, which is my first love, but speaking is catching up. It's catching up, and I do give great honor to the center, what has been created here. This is like home to me, and I want you to know that I appreciate the warmth and the love that you always show me when I come. So thank you so much. Thank you, Reverend James. Thanks, Kevin. Reverend J. Willick, thank you. And Mary, thank you. When Mary was, when she was facilitating this exercise, she said, bring something into mind that makes you happy, makes you smile. And you know, as soon as I closed my eyes, all of these frames of people's faces, one by one, my mother, my grandmother, then my father. My father's frame came into my mind. And I smiled even harder when his face came into my mind's frame, because maybe 4 or 5, even 6 years ago, I could remember a time that the mention of my father's name would have immediately induced me to some kind of unhappiness or sadness. You see, I grew up in the South. I grew up in Nashville, Tennessee, in a small community called Lake Providence. It was founded in 1868 by a missionary. And they said this missionary stumbled upon a field of thickets and brush, and he stood still and he said, right where I stand is right where I'm going to build my church, because this is the providence of God that has led me here. So build his church. He did. And so my father's ancestors, my father's lineage, they all converged on Lake Providence. We all went to the same church, grew up in the same neighborhood, same religion, same thought process, same tradition. And so my father was born in 1925, had all of these ways of survival by the time I came along in the early 1970s. But I tell you, I was different. I didn't too much like tradition. I didn't like going to church every Sunday. But one thing I did like is I really loved to get my way. I'm the youngest. My brother is 15 years older than I am. My sister is 11 years older than I am. And I am the youngest grandchild on my father's side of the family by over a decade. So I found ways to acquiesce these traditional values, these cultural codes, these social ways of being, if you will. And it was by a smile. Can I have it, Mama? Please. Can I, Granny? Please. But you know, there was a flip side to that. Everybody had their hand on your life. As soon as I stepped onto earth, my grandmother said, oh, he's going to be a preacher. I can see it already. My mother thought, you know, he's going to climb the corporate ladder and do really well as an executive. Was a great athlete. My uncles told me, you're going to go and play professional sports. I can already see it. And everybody had their guidebook to Charles's life. And it was fun listening to it. What can I be? What are the possibilities for my life? But I remember there was one person who I waited for years and years and years it would come to hear what he thought, and that was my daddy. My father wasn't much for words, extremely traditional, harsh, stoic, didn't like holidays, never celebrated birthdays. But the things that I had brought to this unit was I loved to hug. I loved to talk. I loved to touch. I was tactile. And my father was none of those things. So growing up as a young child, my father was a king to me. I want to be just like my daddy, I would say. He'd sit at the dinner table and spread his arms and get ready to eat. And I would get up to the table and stretch as far as I could to be just like him and eat just like him. I wanted to walk just like him, wanted to talk. I wanted to be just like him. At the age of 3 and 4, he was the biggest thing in my life. And years went on of me trying to acquiesce to my father, but I never knew what it was all about with him. I never knew the circumstances by which he had been brought up. So as time went on, and as much as I tried to grab on and try and get some kind of semblance of relationship between son and father, the farther away my father seemed to drift. At the age of 8, I pretty much summed it all up. I said, he doesn't like me. He hates me. There's something wrong with me. So even more acquiescing I did to get the approval, the validation from other people. That which I wanted just in one word from my father. 2 words, 3 words. Son, I'm proud of you. This is my boy. I'm so happy. You're doing a good job, son. But none of that came. And as years progressed, those things that were sort of filling my mind became congealed. They became concretized, and at the age of 15, I decided no more of him. He's out of my life forever. Not knowing what I was doing at the time, but I was wanting to get away from the hurt and the pain. I was a high school All-American football player, went to college on a football scholarship. And I think my father came to a couple of my games. My brother bought him. And my brother wanted so much for us to have a relationship. And my brother, I remember after a game, my brother looked at me and said, "Look who I brought with me." And I looked over and I just put my head down. I said, "Oh, him." See, by this time, all of the impulse to try and connect had been surely somehow beaten out of me by experience. I couldn't find the courage to come back to that. Could I? I started working for IBM. And I remember I was working in Memphis. I'd gone home for Thanksgiving and I was driving back to Memphis. And on the side of the freeway, I-40, there was a big billboard that said, "Jesus cares for you." And I slowed down just enough to respond to what was filling my mind. And I said, I don't care if Jesus cares for me. I want my daddy to care for me. I left IBM for another job. Just really trying to find my way at that time. Football hadn't worked out. A year later, they fired me. And as Jay mentioned, I moved to New York with $400 in my pocket. My mother asked me, she said, son, will you go see a psychiatrist before you leave for New York? Will you do that for me, please? She said, you graduated from a top-tier college, got a job working at IBM with all of those benefits, left IBM, went to another company, same scenario, and they fire you. Now you want to go to the most unstable profession there is, in the craziest city in the world. But I didn't know that I was trying to find something other than anything else that I had ever experienced. All of the joy that my grandmother and my mother had brought me through the years, all of my friends, the football was glorious. Oh, yes, it was. And IBM was a great learning experience. But something was calling me. Something else was calling me, and I couldn't put it in those words at that time. So I left for the bright lights of Broadway, $400. I arrived July 6, 1996. West 87th Street, between Central Park West and Columbus Avenue. I went on the corner and I spread my arms out and I said, yes, I'm home. Whew. And I'm far away from him. Running from something to something. The first show that I got was Jesus Christ Superstar. We were on a sleeper bus. We had just left a show in Casper, Wyoming, and we were trekking all the way across the United States to land in Long Beach. I got a couple of hours of sleep, and then I got up and started talking to the driver. Great conversation, and all of a sudden, what seems to be something in my right periphery zooms past the bus. And I said, look at that, that's a tumbleweed. I've never seen a tumbleweed in person before. I've only seen them on the movies. He said, yes, plenty of tumbleweeds out here. We started talking again, and all of a sudden, what seemed to be like another tumbleweed coming toward the bus. I took a right look, and what had appeared so clearly to me in my periphery all of a sudden disappeared. I thought it was strange, maybe another tumbleweed that had gone under the bus. A couple of minutes later, the same thing appears. This time when I turn, it doesn't fade. It doesn't move at all. It's the face of my father. A couple of hours later, we get off the bus, get some breakfast. I'm standing in line. There's a couple, the young child. The mother asks the child, what would you like for breakfast? And the child begins to speak. But I didn't hear the child's voice. I heard my father's voice. I rushed to the restroom and I began a tirade of, why are you tormenting me? I thought I left you in Nashville, far, far away, so I can never see you again. I didn't have to deal with you ever again, I thought. This lingered throughout the tour. I finally returned back to New York, and I'm sitting on the edge of my bed, and I hear a voice say, call him. Call him now. I pick up the telephone. My mother answers the phone. I never bypass talking to my mother, but this time I did. I said, Mom, I need to speak to Daddy. My father picks up the phone. Hello? Just as dry as ever. In that moment, I thought I was ready to take on the courage to at least talk with him about everything that had coursed through my mind for years. And then all of a sudden, fear gripped me. And I began to run up and down this laundry list of things that he had done to me, said to me, how embarrassed I was. And my father calmly said, you must be talking about someone else. I never did any of that. In anger, I flipped the page and I went down the other list. And in the midst, I hear the voice say, tell him. Tell him. And I said, Daddy, I forgive you. Silence on the other side. Well, how dare he? How dare he have not a response for me? Hello, hello, on the other end. The only response was, mm-hmm. Then I hear the words that would change my life forever. The request was, tell him what you really want him to know. I'd known it all along. It was something that I had tried to get since I had come to the planet, since I had known this man, this giant of a man. And I said, Daddy, I love you. I always have, and I always will. Silence. I said, I have to go now. I hung up the phone, and there was a release of tears. Just a release. And in that moment, I made a covenant. I said, I don't care how painful it is from now on. Whenever I hear his voice, whenever I see him, I'm going to tell him I love him. I'm going to tell him I love him. Now we fast forward, 96, 97, 2006, 2007, but let's go back just a year before that in 2005, a year after I had moved from New York to Los Angeles. I get a phone call. My mother calls me. She says, there's trouble in the house. I said, what's going on? She said, your daddy has been diagnosed with end-stage renal disease. He has to go on dialysis 3 days a week. But he's already told the doctor that he's not going. The doctor's given him 6 months. I figured he hasn't talked to you yet. Maybe you can talk to him. There was a warring going on. That's his life, and it was. But there was something inside of me where that love for my father was continuing to well up. And the intention was not to get him to do something, but to let him know what real love was. And that was, Dad, we'd love to keep you here. We'd love for you to stay as long as you can. But if you don't want to, you can go. And that's exactly what I told him. My mother calls me back later that night and she says, well, what did you say to him? I said, I gave him the option. It's his life. He can stay if he wants to. We'd love for him to stay, but if he doesn't want to, he can leave. She said, well, he's staying. Thank you. I went home for 6 months and did my work from Nashville, traveling to centers and colleges and universities. And I saw this man come in from dialysis for the first time. My father had shrunk from 6 feet to about 5'8", bent over, shuffling down the hallway to get to his room with a walker. And I stood back, and all I heard Spirit was saying was, everything must change. We all change. So disheartening. I rushed back into the kitchen. My father was there. My mother had prepared breakfast for him, and I rushed back into the kitchen to see if there was something that I could do to make things comfortable for everybody. And all of a sudden, I hear a voice say, there's Daddy's baby. Daddy loves you so much. Whew, my God. two sides quickening at the same time. That one side that said, where were you when I really needed to hear it? Where was that when I was begging you, tugging on your leg and your, please come out and play with me? Where was it then when I needed just a word of affirmation? I needed to hear you tell me that you loved me. And inside of that, this quantum type of atmosphere, the other side gave me the invitation to step in with him. He's ready now. He's ready now. Are you? I said, yes, but nothing. You made the declaration years ago. You made the covenant. You told him that you loved him all these years. And it was at that moment, when the forgiveness that I called and stated and made to my father in 1996 began to live, because I was ready to let it all go. I was ready to let it all go. Do the frames still pass that are painful? They sure do. My father passed last year. The last 5 days that he was here on the planet, I was in his hospital room. It's only one day that he was coherent. And those last 4 days, I was just coaching him. You did a great job. You did the best you could, Dad. And you can leave when you want to. We're fine. And to watch all of that, those years, the good, the bad, and the awful, encapsulated in just moments, brought to my attention the real meaning for me of freedom. Not just for me, but for my dad too. Letting him go, fully unlocking the door, opening the cell that both he and I were in. I'd put us there. My father is on another journey now, an adventure of his own, and I am too. So in this post-Independence Day, I invite you to find somewhere in your daily walk to close your eyes and let those frames come through again and speak to you. And if there's anything or anyone that you know you need to release, let them go. Even if it's yourself. I forgive me. I forgive me. Everything that I've been holding on to, I let go. I surrender. So I'm ready for my change. We are ready for the change. We're ready for the change. And as we become changed and transformed, we do transform the world. Love only, forgive everything, and then we'll remember who and what we really are. Namaste.